friends. Uncle Marv here with another episode of the IT Business Podcast, the show for IT professionals and managed service providers where we help you run your business better, smarter, and faster. Well, folks, yes, we are coming up to the end of the year, but that doesn't mean that work stops for us. We are going to continue on, and I have yet another MSP profile that I'd like to share with you. Today, I am going to be joined by Ben Wilcox. He is the Chief Technology Officer and the Chief Information Security Officer at a company called ProArch, and he leads a global strategy for cloud modernization, cybersecurity, and AI enablement across the Microsoft ecosystem. Ben, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Uncle Marv, for having me on. I'm really excited about today's conversation.
Yeah. So when we first talked, I think I explained to you how shocked I was to see somebody in a company your size with both the CTO and the CISO role at that type of company.
Yeah, it's a little different. Actually, I do believe that we're probably going to be seeing more and more dual titles because security really is being baked into many of the things that we do. And if you kind of even look at where AI is going, right, you can't really do AI without having a secure foundation. And it's taking data in, data out. Lots of different things have to occur from your securing your environment. And I think really the future is more security kind of baked into that technology future looking role.
Yeah. Now, to give the listeners a better perspective of your company, when I say ProArch is dealing with a global perspective, let's tell us about the demographics and size of your company there.
Yeah, we're about 500 people in size. I joined the organization about 18 years ago. The business has been evolving over that time. And when I joined one of the companies that got acquired by ProArch, we were just doing system integration work back in 2007. And building servers, deploying servers, started getting into some of the cloud stuff. Early days of Microsoft in around 2008, and added on security consulting in the early 2010s. And that's where I got my first exposure in that. Fast forward about 10 years, we started delivering managed security services and got acquired by a company that specialized in data and applications, and that was ProArch. So today, we have a U.S. presence, a U.K. presence, and global delivery centers out of India. I'm blessed with working with some really, really smart people all across the globe. Things kind of are. It's a different view when you start having different cultures mashing together, and getting some really super smart people that have been around the industry in different segments for long periods of time. So, we got people that have been with ProArch since its inception still here. So it's always great to get those different cultures and different viewpoints. Really changes your perspective on what you're doing in IT, what you're doing in business, what you're doing in security.
Right. Now, in those 18 years of ProArch, I know that the landscape has changed technology-wise, security-wise. We've gone from just, deploying basic antivirus to, doing EDRs and HDRs and zero trust and stuff like that. But as your company grows to your size, how does the landscape change both internally for you guys and for the customers that you support?
Yeah, internally, great question. So the big thing that changes when you start getting bigger is, you have to be able to start doing repeatable processes, and it comes into your solutions as well, right? I'm not saying it has to be, cookie stamp type of thing, but you need to be able to kind of understand how to do these things at scale sometimes. And so, repeated processes obviously make it a lot easier, and being able to get it out to, different team members, new team members, et cetera, as you grow, that information needs to be disseminated much quicker. And being able to do that across both sales, internal resources, marketing, it's really an exercise of getting prepared, understanding your markets, understanding how those solutions can be impactful and beneficial to your customers. And then getting to that 70% mark, I think, is really kind of the key, right? Let's document, blueprint this as much as we can, and then turn it out to the market and keep refining it over time.
Right. Now, I assume that you've got some fairly large customers as well. We're talking probably enterprise scale and stuff. So how do you do that sort of consulting and standardization for that size client versus what most of us are used to?
Well, it's at the end of the day, right? Every customer is going to be a little different, and you got to pick and choose where you want to do your business. So maybe it's some of the enterprise stuff. Those are a little bit more bespoke, tailored to them, plugging into a specific area that they might be lacking, right? We're not going to be necessarily targeting them for a complete all-in managed service for like IT support, right? They're probably doing that in-house. Or maybe they want to just outsource part of that, first level to a partner. So it's plugging in where those needs are and understanding if you can kind of help them in that space.
All right. So speaking of services, are you still doing a lot of the IT services that you did in the beginning, or have you moved completely into that security space?
We're doing IT services it's evolved, but the IT support services are still there. Especially in the small mid-market, there's opportunities in that space, right? People want more and more. Our customers are asking we want it all in one package, right? We don't want to be charged for these different options. We want you to just take care of it, right? If Microsoft releases a new feature, go deploy it. So I think that how we used to go to market and what we used to say would be included or excluded is definitely shifted. Our focus now is really pushing our customers to think cloud native. And we're looking at ways that we can get rid of some of those legacy tools, the RMMs and so forth, and really moving towards what Microsoft already has built in, right? How do we start doing all of those things without the added risk of another third party in there or added cost? Right? Our customers are already buying things like Intune, right, as part of their licensing. Can't we just manage the devices like we would at an enterprise, but through as an MSP instead? So we've done a lot of things in the last few years of pushing our customers in that more cloud native direction.
All right. So let's go ahead and go there. I was going to go there in a little bit, but we'll start here now. You mentioned, trying to do as much Microsoft first stuff as possible. I know of other MSPs that have started to go down that path and they kind of get stuck. And whether it's trying to, do Dynamics or understand Power BI or, just the simple stuff like Intune and, all that baked into 365. What makes ProArch stand out in this area? How are you guys able to really go deep into the Microsoft culture, I should say?
Well, it's really being in with 2 feet. First off, Microsoft is our biggest and most influential partnership. We pay really close attention as any new product comes out, new announcements, what they talk about in their new fiscal year. Microsoft sets a lot of their priorities of what they're focused on and where their dollars are going into that. And then as it comes to us, kind of consuming that, right, you got to think about our customers. How would this stuff apply to those customers? What's on the roadmap that makes sense for us to be able to do? Can we try this out with a customer and see if we can't manage their devices, completely by themselves in Intune or with some sort of level of automation tooling behind it? And so over the years, I'd say we probably did our first Intune managed customer probably about 7 years ago, and it wasn't great. But that was a much different experience than what we are having now. Right? We finally got to a point where we have enough platform automation, third-party tooling, things like Nerdio in place where we can start creating standard baselines that we feel are relevant. Microsoft has made investments on that as well in their Lighthouse tooling that they have for Microsoft 365. And really, we're able to kind of deploy some baselines and get some of those things configured. But for us, our secret sauce really is, right, we need to listen to our customers, we need to listen to Microsoft, and kind of merge those two stories together and figure out how it is that we can solve the problem.
All right. You mentioned Nerdio. I was first going to ask you, how many of the third-party tools were you able to move away from? Nerdio is one of those tools that a lot of us smaller MSPs hear about, and we would utilize them because we need the help.
Sure.
My first thought is, a company your size, do you really need the help of Nerdio? But sounds like there's some good stuff there.
There is. I mean, when it comes to multi-tenant management, we could make our own, I'm sure of it. But they also have a head start, right? They've been doing this. I went to NerdioCon back in, my first experience was back in 2022. And went to this NerdioCon in Cancun. And my poor wife was also 8 months pregnant. And here I am off to Cancun.
Did you?
In the middle of winter.
So you didn't take her. She had to stay home.
She declined to going. But yeah, so I'm at the IT conference in Cancun, and sitting on a beach, trying not to send her pictures and trying not to think about how much I'm actually enjoying this time. But I saw right then, right, that they had already had a good head start when it came to AVD. They hadn't done anything with Intune at that point, but they had some really great kind of magic and secret sauces that they were kind of doing on the back end. And why, if they were doing it better than Microsoft was at that point, and they were farther ahead in their development, probably about a year, it takes a long time to start catching up. And we started using them with our Azure Virtual Desktop, and then we moved into leveraging it with Intune, and we've added additional partners in that space too, like Remo 3, which is one for app packaging and helping kind of prepare apps on both the desktop side and virtual desktops. So for us, we need every advantage as well, right? We got the size, we got the people, but I don't want to duplicate when someone else is doing it better.
Yeah. You actually mentioned on their page where you're charting a path to 50% efficiency gains using Nerdio.
Mm-hmm.
Are you there?
Yeah, we are. Okay. We're working there. We're probably pretty close at this point. I mean, Nerdio is key in every single thing that we're doing, especially when it comes to support. So,
all right. So when it comes to Microsoft Focus Security, we talked about the fact that, yes, you're trying to utilize everything that's already built into the Microsoft ecosystem. We talked about Nerdio as a tool there. In terms of other managed service providers, what's a good starting place to look at if you want to try to go Microsoft first?
So, I think everyone's probably pretty much using Entra in some capacity, right? From a login perspective, it's baked into Office 365. That's some probably low-hanging fruit, understanding kind of what those capabilities are that are available in Entra, ensuring that you're leveraging the single sign-on. I'd say the second one, from a scaling perspective and customer value, that there's still a lot of opportunity on, is Intune from your device management. Like, that is still a big push by Microsoft. There's still a lot of legacy Active Directory out there. Getting away and adding, for example, the maintenance on the server side of things, that's a huge efficiency gain, right? If you can get to a point where you're not having Active Directory servers, you're not having to deal with replication issues, you're not having to deal with those upgrades, and getting to the point where you're just logging in on a cloud native identity to your cloud native device, and it's managed through Intune. I think that's still a great spot. And many businesses that we talk to just aren't there. They're not ready yet. Or maybe they're partway there, like they have 2 feet in, or like 1 foot in, right there in this hybrid state, but they haven't ripped off the Band-Aid and removed Active Directory yet. So that's a great opportunity out there.
Well, I'll be honest. I've got several clients I deal with law firms, and a lot of them still have the terrestrial on-prem SQL Server needs. So we've got to keep Active Directory on-prem as well. We are probably, I would say right at the doorstep of telling them that we're going to do, AD syncing to Azure, but they're scared. They're kind of like, well, do we really want to be there? And I said, listen, you're already using the 365. Your mail's already there. We've got a couple of other services there. So this is the next logical step. But for some reason, they just have that hesitancy of, we're fine with what we're doing as long as you got us backed up and protected. We're okay for now. But doing that hybrid, what types of benefits could I tell them? Look, if we do this, we're going to be able to do all these additional things.
Well, when Entra becomes your primary identity source, right, and now you don't have a dependency on your Active Directory functioning, right? So think of a DR, right? Entra is completely, cloud-based. I don't know how many nines that they are up, right? 99.99%. But those outages are few and far between, right? You don't have to worry about if a Radius server goes down. When your identity becomes highly available, I think then you really are able to really take advantage of, for example, something happens on prem, not a big deal. You can still log in, still work on your device, right? So from that business continuity, business recovery side, it makes it a whole lot easier. Tie in, for example, also maybe remove some of that dependency for users to work tied to file shares on-prem or their folders. Put those over into OneDrive, SharePoint, and you have some really great business value right away. And even if there is a cloud outage with OneDrive, right, you have your offline synced version of your files too. So I'm going to knock on some wood. I haven't had an outage in OneDrive in years, or at least I haven't noticed one.
I was going to say, we just had a big old AWS outage. We just had a Google DNS thing happen. So this stuff happens.
Yeah, it was. And Microsoft had an outage somewhere in November with some things that were like partner facing, like you couldn't manage things in Partner Center. Right. But those things do happen. But generally, as I see it, like one of the first, I was really worried about it too. Like when I first started doing cloud stuff back in 2008, and we started doing some of the Exchange migrations, I'm thinking, well, is this going to be more available? Well, what it ended up being is, hey, this user over here is impacted, but at least it's not everyone, right? And that's a lot easier to swallow than 100 people banging on your door saying, hey, I can't log in, when in reality, it's only one or two people having an issue. That's a whole lot easier. I'll take that any day.
All right. We talked a little bit about your work with Nerdio and stuff. Let me ask about the cybersecurity stigma that we're going through right now, where you've got to have not only your antivirus malware, but you got to have an EDR, an XDR, an MDR, or whatever the DR is for that. A lot of us have relationships with vendors in the channel where we're trying to do that ourselves. We are playing with 365 Defender for those of our clients that we're upgrading to business premium plans. We're looking at, combining some stuff with Defender on the desktop and things of that nature. How are you guys approaching EDR and XDR?
Yeah, we're all in with Microsoft on that front. So that full XDR story that Microsoft has of, right, all of your bespoke defenders are able to talk to each other, share telemetry, share when things are occurring, right, adding enrichment, seeing patterns like you would, on the EDR side, but they're really across both like data sources like email to identity to actions that could be happening on the desktop, right? XDR can tie all of those things in. So for us, we're operating a SOC 24/7 that is actually doing that fully managed for our customers. The interesting piece there is, we've been doing this for about 5+ years on the SOC side. It's evolved. We've had other solutions in place over the time there, but as Microsoft has added these new capabilities, we keep expanding, and we keep getting rid of those other pieces that maybe don't quite fit as nicely as they should. In the past, it was, hey, let's get the best of the best, and we'll piece them in here, right? Microsoft didn't have a good web content filtering, so we layered in Cisco Umbrella or other things. Like that stuff's going away for us as Microsoft changes their story and adds more value across what they're doing, right? We want to bring that back to our customers, and frankly, we don't necessarily see all the security vendors making the same investments that Microsoft's making on the security front and bettering their tools to the same level. I'm not going to disparage anyone out there from their tooling, but definitely look at see how things are going, right, and see the trajectory of what sort of investments, what's changed, right, in that year. And like I'll pick on Cisco Umbrella, right? The product hasn't changed since Cisco bought them, right? And it was OpenDNS.
OpenDNS, yeah,
right. Very, very small changes. Maybe there was like one set of products, and the product's great. It works, but is it worth the investment? Because everyone's dollars keep getting squeezed, right? I rarely hear, hey, we got more money to spend on tooling, right? That's not a question I don't think any one of our customers ever say. But they're like, how do we get more value? And we're on that value-seeking side of things for our customers.
Yeah, I've had one customer in 28 years say, hey, I'm going to have extra money at the end of the year. What can I spend it on in IT? And that was only because,
let me write you this big check over here.
Yeah. And they only did it because they knew their servers were old. That was that kind of worked out. But yeah, nobody.
Lots once in a while with those at the end of the year.
Yeah. Let me throw you a curveball. So this morning I was dealing with a customer. It's an auto body shop, and you guys are somehow doing no trust, and I haven't asked you how, but I'm using ThreatLocker as my no trust policy, and so ever since we upgraded this customer to Windows 11, their estimating system had to change. They had to upgrade it, and now, like every few days, they're trying to do these updates, and I'm arguing with the vendor to just give me your installation paths, all the things that I can, whitelist in my no trust, because every time their update stops working, they're like, oh, your antivirus is blocking this, or you got to stop that stuff. And I'm like, no, we're not going to stop protecting our client. But explaining to them what ThreatLocker is quite difficult. Now, granted, it's an auto industry. They're not, they're not into tech the way that we are and stuff. But that's got to be a battle going forward with, no trust. ThreatLocker is a name that most people don't know. Microsoft, at least they know, but they don't know how to integrate a no trust scenario.
I run into this scenario all the time across every type of software product, it seems. I'll give you an example. We had a legal platform, and they wanted us to change our customer's MX record to point to them. Right? No. Like that type of thing, right? Like it's just a lack of understanding, I think, from the security perspective, or just how things even operate. So asking them to go back and give you like all of the paths, or like, hey, let me go, understand how I can go whitelist this application appropriately is really challenging, because they don't know, or their teams don't know on that front. So typically, if that happens, I don't have a great way to get through there, other than like we just try to slow down and explain why they can't do that, and hopefully give them a little bit of insights. Or maybe another way that we can do things today is I try to use AI to explain to me, like, I'm 5 sometimes, right? And use that as a tool to help explain a point that I can't really get across very well. Sometimes it's too challenging. There's just too much of a gap of knowledge.
It is funny. I mean, at first it was with conditional access, when we would just, block every other country. And if somebody traveled, they're like, hey, I went on a cruise and I couldn't connect. You got to tell us. But now conditional access, you can kind of, only allow certain IPs. You can, block stuff. Because I tell people, look, you're here in Florida. Why is somebody in, Raleigh, North Carolina, trying to log into your account. We've got to block that, and they don't get it.
Yeah, and that risk, right? Maybe there's other things out there, and that's the really cool thing about kind of the all Microsoft piece is these tools are all talking to each other, right? So the device might have some information. Your Purview, like if you're using, for example, the data classification side or data access, right? Risky behaviors. This user's been downloading a whole bunch of things, right? Maybe that's not right. And not only that, they're coming from a geo distance that's different than you are, right? That's an absolutely immediate risk. Doesn't matter if they've logged in appropriately, right, with the MFA, but things look funny. And when those tools can all talk to each other and share what's happening, then it can make better risk-based decisions for you and help mitigate some of those things.
So I was going to try not to ask you some of those questions, but metadata classification. I see that every time in the portal and I just blow right by it because I'm like, I'm not ready for that. But that sounds like it could be a combination of no trust, XDR, EDR, data mapping together. Am I correct in that, or how should that be explained?
So the Purview side of it really looks at, there's multiple levels of Purview, which doesn't make it any easier. Microsoft has Purview that's associated with Microsoft 365, and they have Purview that's associated with Azure. Different products, but they're all under the brand called Purview. So depending on where you're at, you might see different things. The Microsoft 365 portion of it really is about looking at your data for different types of sensitive information that might be in there, right? Social security numbers, credit cards, etc. Right? You can put these classifiers out there that kind of go and create an index of where this information is. And you can choose, hey, go look in my email, go look in SharePoint, go look in OneDrive, go look in Teams, etc. And once that information's there, you can create labeling policies. And those labeling policies can be automatically applied. So if, for example, it did find those sensitive information types, it can classify those based off of your plan, right, from your information security plan. Maybe, right, you don't want like social security numbers or credit card numbers, they should be encrypted and sitting at rest. You can have a policy that says you encrypt it. Don't allow these to be forwarded, right? You have to be a ProArch employee to be able to open them. It doesn't matter if, or maybe you have to be assigned access to this label by the owner. So you can create all these business rules around that. And then from there, you can also do things like if it's, for example, being stored in a certain library, maybe you want to label it. There's lots of different permeations of this, but it's really about protecting that information. Purview's also added a bunch of things around insider risk in communications. So, for example, you might want in certain environments to understand that sexual harassment's not occurring within your team's communication or something like that. It can give some level of insight and look for those types of patterns within the communication side of things. Or it can even be extended a little bit farther. They call it insider risk management. There's some, right? There's been this, I forget which threat actor group, but one of the North Korean threat actor groups has been putting a lot of people into the IT industry that are not U.S. citizens. They're not real employees, right? They're kind of fictitious workers, and they're collecting paychecks, but they're also having access to the sensitive information. What happens when there's a bunch of data that's being downloaded by an employee that really shouldn't be downloading that, or looking for different types of behaviors that are outside of the norm for your business? The insider risk management piece bubbles that up. And you can do things like trigger conditional access policies when those things occur. So, for example, maybe you want to lock out that user from being able to download those things, or have it stopped on that endpoint. So you can do all of those through Purview. There's lots of different pieces in that. Certainly not the most straightforward, easiest tool to do, but it's also baked in and it's pretty comprehensive.
Yeah, I did. I don't want to say I dipped a toe into it, but I did try to take a peek, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not ready for that. So, at some point, though, I think we're going to have to be.
It's a great skill, and like there's Microsoft has a bunch of like light training on things too. So if you want to kind of start dabbling with it with your own business, take a look at it. I'd say that's definitely an area that is of big interest, especially as organizations are looking at Copilot being deployed. Right, more and more people want to make sure that they haven't made a mistake and exposed sensitive information to Copilot, which is too easy to surface to between coworkers.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned training, so of course, there's places that we can go for that. But I do want to make sure that we mention that you guys will do work with other MSPs. So let me at least ask, in terms of that type of engagement, what types of projects do you typically help with?
Yeah, good question, Marv. The projects that we really like to work with other partners on, anything that's a one-time project. So think of it, right? You have a area in Microsoft that is outside of your expertise. The one area that we really don't do is biz apps, but we do a lot of Azure work, a lot of Microsoft 365 work, a lot of security work, and a lot of data work. Right? People are wanting to connect different data sources and starting to be able to leverage things in like Copilot Studio and surfacing some of their business data within the agents. Those are all areas that we work with partners on. So that's kind of like an outcome-oriented one. We could also do things like co-managed solutions where we bring in a partner or like a team member that's part of your team and can help be kind of fill in that solution area. A lot of our partners will see it as, hey, we can deliver this part of the project, but this other piece is not something that we do. Right? They're asking for IT support and security, or they're asking for security and we can't do the IT support side of it. So we like to plug in, have those conversations, see what's the right fit. Do RFPs together sometimes, right? If it makes sense. And then the other option, Marv, is sometimes we have IT providers that really are looking for more of a dedicated resource. And we've done that too from our global capacity center perspective, right? You need to be competitive. You want to bring in some offshore talent. We can help on a dedicated level on that front too.
When you say dedicated, are you talking about oversee like the best thing I can think of for MSPs that I've spoken with, MS 365 tenant management, where we're trying to basically do all the things we're supposed to do with monitoring all the rules and the policies and stuff? Are you talking about helping to get those set up, or are you talking about helping us to develop the ways to monitor all of that?
Well, either one of those scenarios. We've actually helped people build practices around their Microsoft services and doing it in a more modern way. The other thing I was referring to was actually like think of it more of like a SAFOG type of scenario, right? You need a dedicated, you want a small team that's offshore or even onshore to fill those needs. And they're very specialized in whatever types of services you're looking for that are Microsoft oriented. Those are all areas that we like to plug in.
All right. Do you outsource your SOC?
No, it's inside. We do it ourselves.
No, I mean like outsource it to people like me.
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Interesting. I want to, I know I put on your notes here, I wanted to talk about this upcoming webinar, and you kind of mentioned agents a few minutes ago, but you've got a webinar coming up that somebody at your company is doing called How to Build Agents That Understand Your Data with Copilot Studio. And that is going to be on December 16th. I'll have a link in the show notes there. First of all, what is that? Do you know about that webinar? I should have asked you first.
I do.
Okay.
I encourage that webinar to be put out because I think it's when I saw the demo of it, what we were doing is that we got to show everyone this. So the webinar is going to give you the idea of how you can do a Copilot agent. So think of it as a low-code agent that uses real data on the back end, right? So one of the things that people don't like about AI is the hallucinations or the output. Maybe it might not be as accurate, right? You feel like you got to double check those things. Well, there are methods and patterns to be able to do agents that use real information and also don't give you like made up numbers, right? No one wants to query an agent and ask, "How's my financials this month?" And says you're on track, and then you get to the end of the month and you look at your report and you're like, "Wait a second, this doesn't look right." So it's about getting accurate information, and so we're going to show how that's done.
All right, great. We'll have a link to that, and again, that's coming up December 16th. So if you're listening to this show at the time you're supposed to, you'll have plenty of time to sign up for that. Ben, I know we're going to run out of time here, but I wanted to get to one more name that I wanted to get your help with, the Microsoft Intelligent Security Association, or MISA. What is that, and why should we be wanting to be a part of that?
So MISA is a invite only association with Microsoft. It means that you've demonstrated to Microsoft that you are kind of all in on the Microsoft side. So there's two sides of it. There's a service provider side, so think of your MSPs, and then there's also a independent software vendor, or think of it as your software companies out there, right, that make integrations with Microsoft. Those could be companies like Palo Alto, all the way down to the ones that plug in directly into a specific product. So, for example, you mentioned ThreatLocker. They might be one of those companies in there. I'm not certain on that, but the idea here is, right, security is a team sport, and security, you can't really do it by yourself. And there's so many other partners out there that can help you do it. So we partner with other members in there to help deliver solutions that, for example, we couldn't be able to do alone, or to try to get to the joint outcomes with Microsoft. It also gives us a lot of ability to see things early, right? So getting those roadmaps from Microsoft, and if you can imagine, right, like we just came out of Ignite, it was a week full of announcements and of things that are happening, and then they're going to do that again in the springtime during their build conference. We often know most of these things that are occurring 9 months to a year out. So it gives you a really good headway and runway to your customers, and understanding kind of where you are from the value perspective, what's coming down there, and what should you be thinking about in your solutions, and maybe value adds that could benefit your customers. Any sort of runway, and like, I'm sure we all feel like we're chasing stuff all the time, right?
Oh yeah.
Feel like you're behind, right? Like, I love to be able to have a little bit of insight in there and thinking about what might be coming versus a reaction after the fact.
All right. So MISA is something I had not heard of. And obviously, since it's invite only, I doubt that I'll be invited anytime soon. But from what it sounds like, we want to try to partner with vendors that are a part of MISA, right? Sure.
Yeah. I mean, they're going to be the ones that are at the very top.
All right.
They're the ones that know what they're doing.
All right. And I did not prep for this, so I will make sure I get a link for that to let people know where they can go see who is, or I guess, do they publish who's a part of MISA? Or?
Yeah, they do. Yep, you can search on it. They publish solutions over in the Microsoft Cloud Catalog for services. There is also, like if you go to any of the big security stuff or Microsoft shows, MISA is always there. We've done demos at the MISA demo station there of kind of what ProArch does. So there's lots of things around the Microsoft side of it, but like RSA, they have all of these things right outside of the RSA. Like, you don't have to go buy a ticket to RSA. You can sign up for the RSA Microsoft side of it, and a lot of those things are run by the MISA team.
All right. I know I've only got you for a few more minutes, so let me try to pare down to 2 questions. Let's see which ones I want to ask. Let me ask this one kind of as a general note that most people, I know it's a low-hanging fruit question, but what do you think are some of the biggest obstacles that we are facing now when it comes to cybersecurity? I know everybody's focused on AI, but we've kind of forgot about cybersecurity, and AI is now fueling what we need to pay attention to. What do you think some of the biggest obstacles are?
Identity, number one. I think people we still see huge risks in there. Phishing attacks are continuing to go up. I think it makes up more than 50% of the types of attacks that we see at this point. I don't have those direct numbers in front of me, but earlier this year it definitely was, and I can't see that changing. So thinking about, I think a great opportunity is looking at, for example, how to move to the passwordless options, right? The passkey side of it, whether it's YubiKey to log in or Windows Hello that's built right into your device. When we started going passwordless, we were able to do it. We already had a head start, right? Because we already had Windows Hello deployed. We already had 50% on the passkey side of it because Windows Hello abides by that side of it. So it was really just getting the other, mobile devices and other pieces over onto the passkey side. So I sleep a lot better as a CISO, knowing that, right? It's much, much harder to try to compromise an identity here, but I think it's also an area for most customers that still is a weak point. Find these things as we onboard new customers, talk to them, right? They think they're fully covered, and that they have some big risks out there when it comes to lack of MFA or even MFA issues where people are just getting intercepted in the middle, right? We got to be able to stop those things.
Okay. Question 1A. Do you think deepfakes is going to be as big a problem as I think it is?
We did a really scary exercise as part of Microsoft's AI tour. We were thinking of what demos could we do, and our data team took, it was literally 3 seconds of my voice and created an avatar that you could ask questions to, and it would reply in my voice. And I was sitting in bed one night and said, ask me a question to my wife, and she asked it. I typed it in there, and it replied back in a kind of she could pick it up, but I don't think most people could. So I think from a deep fake perspective, it's super easy. It's going to be super challenging. We're going to see more and more problems there, whether it's voice, phishing, emails, communication. It's all getting way too easy on that front.
All right, that's a whole nother discussion. But as we end off here, let me ask this question. So I'm sure at least a couple of my listeners are going to want to reach out to you. Like I said, they're looking to do that Microsoft first approach. How should, I know they're going to probably look at your contact information and find you on LinkedIn and stuff, but what would be the best way for an MSP to approach ProArch if they wanted to, start a relationship?
Yeah, reach out on the contact form at proarch.com. That's PROARCH.com. And one of our teammates will connect with you on there. That's probably the easiest and best way. You can always find me on LinkedIn too. Ben Wilcox, BenWilcox. Pretty active on there. Marv, also, one thing I wanted to mention is even if you can't attend that webinar that we have on the 16th, we post all these. They're all on demand as well. So there's a link right on the website under events that will give you that previous content as well. I just did one in November on AI security with Microsoft. So if you're kind of curious of what you should be doing in that front, there's a webinar back in November as well.
Yep, that's actually a whole subpage on your events, all the webinars going back. And actually, here's one, using automation to outsmart attackers. That seems pretty cool.
Yeah, I think that gives a little insight into our SOC too, how we do things.
Yeah, okay. All right. Well, Ben, thank you very much for coming on. I already know that I have a ton of follow-up questions, so I hope that sometime in 2026, I can get you to come back and we'll chat some more. I really would like to dive into what MSPs can, or maybe not what, but maybe how MSPs can dive more into the Microsoft ecosystem. I think a lot of us want to, but just haven't.
Yeah, there's immense opportunity there. In my opinion, I might be a little bit biased because I am very Microsoft centric in my role, but there's no greater opportunity than from a partnership perspective than the one with Microsoft.
All right, there you have it. Yeah. All right. So we will look to have him back. There you have it, folks. Ben Wilcox, Chief Technology Officer and Chief Information Security Officer at ProArch. And as I talked about, we talked, cloud modernization, cybersecurity. We didn't get a ton into AI, but obviously a lot there inside the Microsoft system. And Ben, thank you very much, and we'll chat again soon. All right, folks, that's going to do it for this episode of the IT Business Podcast. Again, as we count down 2025, if you're listening in real time, we will have the last podcast of the year, the holiday party, coming up on Wednesday, December 17th at 8 p.m. Eastern. We also have a very special Techies and Trekkies show that will be happening on the 16th at 4 p.m. Eastern. That should be a good show as well. And we might squeeze out one more audio podcast, Never Sleep for the Weary here. But that'll do it, folks. We thank you very much for downloading and subscribing. Check you out again real soon. And until then, holla.